Hello, I'm Rick Moore, a publisher of Whitecap Publications. Today I'm going to interview author Tom Frye, and he's got the phenomenal thing of having done 18 books. So he's got 18 books. And the very first book he did was called Eight Ball, Scratching on the Eight Ball.
Scratching on the Eight Ball.
Right. And he's going to discuss plot development today. So greetings, Tom, and let's get started.
Okay.
Right. How did you come up with the initial idea for your plot of Eight Ball? And what inspired you? What inspired you to explore this particular story?
I'd been a youth worker for about 5 years when I started that book, and I was frustrated with all the kids I tried to work with, and they wouldn't go to school. They ended up in institutions. Three of them died from drug overdoses. 2 of them died from suicide. In that 5-year period, I was affected by all those kids, and
that must have been heart-wrenching, by the way.
Yeah, it really was. I thought that you could save every one of them, but you can't, and that's what I found out in my book. Writing more of the book, a lot of people read it, they relate to it. My initial plot was a kid goes to a party, and the party gets busted, and a kid grabs the wrong leather jacket. He thought it was his, and it belonged to a drug dealer. And he escapes from the party. He hides in a doghouse, which reminded me of something I did back when I was a
kid. You hid in a doghouse?
Yeah.
I don't want to ask why, do I?
Yeah, no, you don't. No, we don't want to. We don't want to go there. I changed the names to protect the guilty.
Yes. Is that a retelling of an incident in your life, or just a general plot idea, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a retelling of things that happened with me. The more and more I developed this character, the more I saw, him being me back when I was a kid. And really? I must have wrote that when I was 19.
Oh, you were 19 when you wrote that?
Yep.
I'll be darned.
I started it out at Havelock Park, which is where I did most of my youth work. One afternoon, I sat down at a picnic table and I started writing, "It's a Bust." And from then on, the story just developed and kept coming and coming. And it took me probably, 6 months to write. 300-page book. And
is that your first book, by the way?
Yeah, that's my first book.
You have natural talent for writing, Tom.
Yeah, my firstborn child. But that was my way to try to put a message through to kids. I had a boy who took 4 drugs one night. He snorted cocaine. He drank tequila, swallowed a horse tranquilizer.
Oh, wow.
Broke into the veterinarian clinic and stole PCP. And he got up on an overpass and thought he could fly, and the cops come to get him, and he started biting chunks out of his hands, and they had to handcuff him. He was 15 years old. He was one of my first probation cases.
Oh, brother.
Yeah, and I went, and he told the cops to get a hold of me that night, and I ended up at the hospital. Actually, they jokingly called me Father Frye back in those days, and so the kid told the cops, "Get Father Frye." So they went to the Catholic Church and woke up Father Witt, the priest. And so we got a drunken kid in our car, and he said, "Oh, I know who you need." So next thing you know, I'm at the hospital, and I kept thinking, there's got to be a way I can write something to give a message to these kids that they don't have to be just like each other. Like this kid, he wanted to be like everybody else and be popular, and so he did as many drugs as he could, crammed into his system, and it exploded. It backfired. So,
well, can you discuss the process of developing the main conflict in your plot, and how did you ensure that it was engaging and drove the story forward?
Well, my whole plot centered around a murder, an unsolved murder, and
really,
it was a narcotics agent. She was They had to dismiss 40 cases when she was killed because she was going to testify against 40-some people. And it was an unsolved murder that I was writing about, and I had to kind of decide if I wanted to fictionalize it and solve the murder or not, and stick true to the story. But that was the conflict. That was the big conflict, is this unsolved murder, and the kid gets evidence to that murder. The rumor was, and I talked to many people on the street about this murder, and the one rumor was that somebody had been beaten up by the people that killed her and told if she ever talked, they would come back and take care of her. So she wrote their names down and put it in a safe deposit box and gave her friend a key and said, turn this in if I'm ever, end up dead. Now, I don't know if that was a true story or not, but it just sounded like a good plot. And so I wove it into the story. The kid grabs a black drug dealer's jacket, the wrong jacket, the black leather jacket, and in that jacket is a key, and that key goes to a safe deposit box. And when the kid is talked to by a detective later, he's got defiance disorder, so he's not going to cooperate at all. He's 13 years old, and he's got addiction problems also, which compounds his issues. Right. So it was kind of a double whammy there. And
now,
yeah.
For the studio audience, for the less experienced writers, how did you ensure that it was engaging and drove the story forward, though?
Well,
were you immersed in the story?
Oh yeah, I mean, I became attached to the main character right away. He was a composite of 3 other kids I'd worked with pretty closely. So when I brought him into play, it was real life. I mean, I didn't have to make up a lot, okay? Because he had a colorful personality, these 3 kids, and they combined it into this one. I've had teachers read it later, and they told me, they said, I don't know if I want to slap the shit out of that kid or if I want to hug him.
Now, you've talked in the past about your ability to visualize the plots.
Yeah.
Is that how you ensured that it was engaging and drove the story forward? Do you work it all out in your head?
Yeah, it's image driven. Everything is image driven in my world. It's I see a screen in my head, and one scene leads to another, and I didn't sit down and plot it out. I didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
Oh no, I'm.
It evolved naturally, right?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever really done that. Stuck to a religion to do that.
Right.
I usually see the vision and then just report what I see.
Right. Huh. So you work the story, visualize the story in its component parts, right?
Right.
That's how you do it, right? All right.
Yeah.
How do you approach the pacing of your plot? Because you've got to edit the story afterwards, I imagine. And do you have a specific structure or method in mind to keep the readers engaged throughout the story? Or do you just assume that they'll be engaged and go with the story because it's so real to you?
Well, back in the day when I was made to read required reading books in school, I vowed that if I ever wrote a book, I'd never write one as boring as those. I wanted action all the way through it. And it basically does. It goes from one act to another act to another act, and it's action related. And I think a lot of people said it's a page turner, it's a cliffhanger.
Right.
My one friend said, read my stories is like the boiling frog, and you slowly turn up the heat, slowly turn up the heat, and suddenly you're cooked. So that's kind of how I write, I think.
So let me get this straight. To keep the action going, right?
Right.
To keep the pacing going. So you've got scenes in your head, right?
Right.
And those scenes involve action, right? All the time, action, right?
Yeah, and dialogue comes later. I mean, I drive it with my action, and then later add the dialogue.
All right. Does the do you well, let me say this right. Do you talk in your character's voice, or do you hear your voices in your head talking?
Oh yeah, I
How do
hear
you
the,
come up with the dialogue?
yeah. I was sitting at a stoplight one time, and a lady pulled up next to me. I was having a three-way conversation between three of my characters, and she looked over at me, and I said, "I'm rehearsing for a play," and she peeled out of there.
She peeled out, huh?
Yeah, but no, I hear their voices, and they're pretty clear to me.
Well, let's see. You visualize the plot in action scenes, right? And that's how you engage the reader.
Right?
But were there any challenges you faced while developing the plot, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I'm trying to put them out a message, but I don't want to preach. I don't want to be it like a. Somebody said my writing is edutainment, educational and entertaining.
Right?
Um, so I try to stick to that, but I don't want it to be dragged down by giving out all this information.
Right.
I try to use that in dialogue, but sometimes it's hard because I have to describe something, and sometimes I go back and describe it later in dialogue, but most of the time,
Do you have to edit your writing a lot?
that book I didn't. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. My publisher was an educational publisher back then, and he hired a English major to sit down with me every Monday night and go over the book with me. And she taught me so much about grammar and punctuation, and to tell the truth, I didn't even know where the quotation marks went.
You
And
didn't? Oh my
no,
gosh.
yeah, I was too broke to pay attention in school. Once I learned, then the rest of my books, I've rewritten so many books, 10 times before they finally hit the press.
Did you have to change your plot when you read Scratch It Out the Eight Ball after you finished it, right? Did you have to make major plot changes?
No, no,
Oh,
it laid out the way
rolled
it
off the tongue,
was.
so to speak, right?
What's that?
It rolled off your tongue, your fingertips, right?
Yeah, yeah. I could have gone farther, but I didn't. I ended it, when I did about page 300. But the story just kept coming. It just kept coming out, and like I said, I didn't plan it. I didn't plot it. Didn't write out an outline. A lot of people, stick to outlines. I didn't know what an outline was.
So
Now
you
I know.
didn't outline the plot before writing. Do you ever outline the plot before
Oh,
writing?
oh yeah, now I do. Sometimes, and sometimes I stick to just carried through with the images and carried through with the pictures in my head.
They
Um,
evolve organically as you write, right?
yeah, yeah. Um, it's smart to have an outline. It's a good thing to have an outline, but a lot of times the story kind of writes itself.
I've never had an outline either in my books. I've never had an outline. You're the
Wow.
second person that I've talked to that doesn't have any outline, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Just evolved naturally, right?
I don't know if that's good or not, but
Well,
that's
one of
how
my authors outlines meticulously everything she does. And man, it's really boring to talk to her because she got the details, the outline, and everything like that. She doesn't have any organic creation, but it
yeah,
works for her in the end.
right,
So,
right.
I mean, I guess you're saying that an organic story, organically evolved story, can be fine, and also an outline plot can be fine too, right? Depending on the writer.
Right, right. I mean, yeah, it depends on what kind of if you want to like the rest of my books, I've rewritten them and rewritten them. All writing is rewriting. That's what I heard, and
Right.
so I do that now. But with Eight Ball, no, I just wrote it, and it just came out, and I didn't even think of editing. I didn't even think of revising. I can't even believe I didn't do it because I've revised so many books since, you
Yep.
know, and actually turned, the plot around, having something happen way in the beginning when it should have happened toward the end. I switch those around a lot nowadays. I'll write something and suddenly I'll have to copy and paste, and
Well, that brings up an interesting point, right? How do you create your main characters, and how do their individual arcs, story arcs, intersect with the main plot?
Well, with Eight
It's a
Ball,
tough question, I know, but honestly, it begs to be answered.
well, Reason was a troubled kid, and his friends are trying to steer him away from, getting addicted and doing more drugs because he's already got enough problems with his behavior disorder. But his brother is a staple in the story. He's a good kid, and he's trying to be a father figure to his little brother.
Right?
And so between Boone, who is his brother, and Julie and Colin and Vince, who are Reason's friends, um, they're trying to steer him in the right direction. And so it's kind of like me when I was working with kids. It's just a tough thing to do, to try to empathize with them and have patience with them and pull them through, because some of them you're not going to save. And Reason was a salvageable kid, which was funny because once the book was published, I sent it to Scott Meredith Literary Agency and paid $650 for them to review the book. And he told me the character is a psychopath who should have died in the story.
I guess you got the wrong editor of that story.
Oh, totally. And I was like, what does he know about kids?
Well, how do you create the myriad of characters in your story, right? Let's stick to scratch on the eight ball, but how did you create all the stories, and how does their individual story arcs combine to make one successful story arc, one successful plot out?
Well, with Eight Ball, it just all fell into place. It just kept,
Just organically, right?
yeah, one character came in and the next character left and the next character came in, and each character added something to the whole story. And, but with the rest of my books, I have trouble keeping my characters limited. Um, I don't want to overcompensate with characters, and I do sometimes. And I go back and I rewrite and I take out characters.
Really?
Yeah, and then I have their personality blended into the next character that's going to stay.
Do you save the characters you take out and do them in a later book?
Sometimes I do, but sometimes I write them off completely, and it's like, God, I didn't even need this character. Why did I even put him in here? But his dialogue, I take his dialogue and I keep it.
Okay.
So,
Now, are there any subplots in your story? Because you got the main plot,
yep.
right?
I've always got subplots going. Yeah.
How many subplots do you typically have in a book?
Probably about 6.
6. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. And some of them are just subtle. Some of them are just low key. And I got to make sure I close those. I have closure on those. But they all add to the story. And
do you draw them at the end into one successful resolution?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you have a specific theme or message you wanted to convey through your plot? Sounds like the salvation story, right?
Yeah. My book has been read in detention centers, alternative schools, drug treatment centers, 3 federal pens. So I've had a captive audience, actually,
Yep.
But like I say, I try not to preach, but yet I do put a message in every book. I do try to.
You do.
Bring a positive message, and I guess my dragon to slay has been drug abuse, and it's with every kid I've ever worked with, they've had an addiction problem besides their behavior problem, and it's just compounded the problems for them and the troubles for them. And so I try to put a message in there about that.
Okay.
And with Reason, in Eight Ball, yeah, he's a very, very troubled kid, but you know what? he gets redeemed later, and he changes, and he turns around and becomes an adult, and he works with kids that were just like him.
Ah, all right.
So that's the follow through. That's kind of character arc right there, because he comes through, and I've got 5 other books in the series so
Yeah.
far, with 3 more planned, and he's an adult in those, and he's
Right.
learned so much from what he went through. Um,
Did you have a particular ending in mind from the beginning of the story, or did it evolve as you write?
um, yeah, well, yeah, I knew where I wanted to go with it, but I didn't, that wasn't stuck in stone. Nothing set in stone when I write.
Right?
I'll change it if I have to.
Right?
And
So do you have a general idea of the resolution of the plot in mind, or
yeah,
just make it up as you go along, right?
well, yeah, I make it up as I go along, but I keep a in view in mind, and I stick to that. Now
Well,
with 8 Ball, I had a character that he died in the story, because that's true to life, and it's sad, and people, a lot of the readers said they're pissed at me when I killed him off, but it's like, but that really happens. That's what happens in life, and I had to change his death because he died earlier in the book through an overdose, which was a true story about a boy who took aerosol deodorant and inhaled it, and it suffocated him. He was 15 years old, but later on in the story, I let the kid live a little bit longer, and then he was knocked off some other way. But
well, sometimes writers write methodically with a plot outline, the details, and they see on the page where the character arcs go. And they do that for every book they write. They write a beginning, a middle, and the end in an outline, right? And then they
right,
flesh it out, right?
right, right.
So it's, in the end, it comes out very boilerplate, right?
Yep,
Because everybody that does that has the same thing, a middle, a beginning, and the end, and they develop their characters to do specific things. But you let yours evolve naturally,
yep, yep,
and your stories evolve naturally.
yep. And I think it pulls together at the end, and with, now with rewriting, which I'm getting really good at.
Right?
Um,
Well, if you notice the writers that write organically, when people ask them, how do you develop a plot? How do you develop your characters? They say, always, they say, well, write an outline. But they don't write any outlines, right? They just go with the flow.
right,
And they
right,
get beautiful works come out of it, right?
right, right.
And the people that outline, I'm just not one of those people, and you aren't either, obviously.
No, no, I never have been. I did that with one book, and that was my fantasy book. I had to, because there was so much happening, so much history, so much backstory,
Right?
um, and that book has turned out to be about 8 books in length. And now I'm taking parts of that and patching it into my Havelock Emerald story. Um, and it's an urban fantasy now. It's a mythic fantasy where people from this realm go into that realm, and all that background I had for all that, it's really played out. I mean,
Oh, really?
I've got tons of notes on that and tons of background on that.
Well,
Um,
next time we talk, it'd be very interesting if we do the same thing next week, just to do just to get and explore ideas of creativity. For
right,
example, not every person that we say like just organically evolving, right? Not every person, they sit and they stare at the page of the computer, right? And they say, Jesus, I don't know what to write.
right.
So that's how they get falling into the trap of writing an outline. But it'd be really interesting to see, if you give some thought for the next interview, how your creativity evolves and what it evolves from, and
Right,
what are the limits of creativity, right?
right, right.
So, all right, and this concludes today's interview. But honestly, you've got to read Tom's book, Scratching Behind the 8 Ball, because it's really remarkable. You got it on Whitecap Publications, on Amazon, and every bookstore that's around you. And Tom's written 18 books, so you've got to read every one of them. Once you read one, you get hooked on the rest, right? So, all
I
right.
hope so.
Till next time, Tom. We'll talk about creativity next time, right?
Okay. All
All
right.
right. I'll see you then. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.